and welcome to another episode of A Little Privacy, Please. I'm Jenny Holmes. I co-lead Nixon Peabody's privacy and cybersecurity team, along with my partner, Jason Kravitz. We are the co-hosts of this video series, and this is our first video of 2025. We are delighted to welcome a special guest today, Kalindhi Bhatia. Kalindi is a partner at BTG Advaya in Mumbai, India. She is a tech and media lawyer who specializes in data privacy, online content, and digital payments. Welcome. We're really excited to talk to you about the recent developments in India's privacy landscape. Now, to set the scene, can you tell us what the current privacy regime looks like in India, what the laws are looking like?
Just to start off with the answer, it's going to be a slightly long one. So, data privacy in India, as we know it today, is currently regulated by the Information Technology Act of 2000. Now, this is a new millennium law. It's about 25 years old. This is when we were coming into the 2000s, and technology was still growing in India. In about 2011, the government came out with a specific regulation on data privacy with under this law itself. The law today is a very simple one. They're just about 8 rules. It talks about how you have to collect consent when you're collecting personal data, that you need to have a grievance officer, some security standards. Overall, it allows for data transfers overseas. So, pretty straightforward in terms of compliance. Uh, the unfortunate bit about this law is we don't really have a regulator in place today. So, what that means is that there's no enforcement and compliance is also very poor. Now, as you know, that we currently have a new law coming into force. It already exists, and the rules are still underway. Now, how this law came about was in and around 2017, there was a litigation that was filed before the Indian Supreme Court, where the court held that information privacy is a fundamental right of the people, and they asked the central government to come out with a regulation that's specifically focused on data privacy. Now, between 2017 and 2023, COVID happened. There were a lot of delays around that regulation. There were a lot of public consultations. There were two, three iterations of the law which were very GDPR-esque. And there was, because of that, there was a lot of industry pushback also. So, in around 2020, late 2022, 23, we saw the law come out as it is today. It's a slightly toned down version of the GDPR, but it's definitely a step up from the 2011 rules. Uh, it lot more compliance coming in for data collectors, and so yeah. I mean, I think that's where we are today. We have a law is which was implemented in 2011, still in force, but we're still trying to implement the 2023 law because it what they did was, in order to avoid pushback from industry, they came up with a law which would primarily be enforced by way of rules, because the rules don't need to be approved by the Indian Parliament. So we've got a set of draft rules in the last 2 weeks, so interesting times. And most likely, these are due for public comments still. They will be, the public comments go in by around February 18th. And after that, I think it's just wait and watch, and we'll see how the law shapes up.
So, Kalindi, thanks for that background. What kind of processing activities are covered by the new law? And then also, does it have extraterritorial applicability?
So the new law applies to processing of digital or subsequently digitized personal data. Anything that is in physical form would not be covered by it. Any processing of such data that takes place within India or takes place outside India in relation to goods and services being provided within India, anyone who's doing that would be covered by it.
So, what forms the basis for processing under this new law?
Primarily consent, which is a big deviation from GDPR. So, if you collect personal data of any person, you have to do it with their free consent. There are thresholds under the law itself that it has to be free, specific, unambiguous, and all of that. And there are certain legitimate purposes for which you can use the data, but again, it does not contemplate use under contract. It's essentially that where you're processing it for a merger, acquisition, transaction, where it's employee data for a medical emergency. So it's a pretty lean list of purposes for which you can do it as a legitimate purpose.
So, Kalindi, are there separate requirements for getting consent from children under the new law?
That's right. So there's a much higher threshold for getting consent from children and also disabled persons. Um, it requires you to get verifiable consent from their parents or their guardians. And thankfully, with the rules that have the draft rules that are out, we have some clarity on what verifiable consent is. It's essentially that when I reach out to a parent or a guardian to get their consent for that child or the disabled person, I need to make sure that they're able to confirm their identity and their age. And they can do this by either disclosing an identity document or giving you access to any of their digital tokens, which are connected to their ID information. In the Indian context, we have something called the DigiLocker, which has all our ID data. And I would essentially be able to connect it to any kind of online tool for my ID verification.
Wow, that's different than anything we've seen here with the digital tokens. But what sort of obligations are applicable to the entity we know as data controllers? And then are there separate obligations for data processors?
So the law is primarily targeted at data collectors. So they're the full focus of the law. They're expected to collect consent, make a notice available to tell you what their data privacy practices are. They're expected to report data breaches, implement security standards, make sure that data principals are able to exercise the rights available to them under law. So all of this falls on the data collector themselves. Data processors, on the other hand, are slightly secondary under the law. So, what they're expected to do is essentially make sure that they comply with their contract with the data collector. So, what we might see is a lot of data collectors imposing some of these compliances on data processors to make sure that they're able to meet the requirements under the law.
So, Kalindi, how is the law going to be enforced? Is there a regulatory body? Are there private rights of action?
So we have a data protection board that will be built up to enforce the regulations and levy fines, which is they're going to function as a adjudicatory and enforcement body and not as a regulator, which will be a function that will continue to remain with the central government. The rules suggest that this will be a digital office, so it'll be interesting to see how the regulators set up and how they enforce the regulation.
So Kalindi, as you may know, we are here in the U.S. are kind of heading towards the Super Bowl, which is the culmination of all sports in the world, as we of course know here in the U.S. And I know in India you're crazy about cricket, but I'm guessing that some folks over there pay some attention to the Super Bowl. So is there a team that you're rooting for? Because Jenny is kind of a rabid Buffalo Bills fan. Gets a little bit irritating on occasion. But I'm wondering, are you paying attention over there? And do you have a team in the hunt?
No, I don't think I follow the teams, but I definitely look out for all the ads that come out before the Super Bowl because some of them are really good. So,
All right,
yeah,
those find
I
their way
think
to India as well.
yeah, YouTube is a great place. So,
It's a very politically correct answer.
yeah.
And then, Kalindi, also, so I know that India has some amazing beaches and so I'm wondering if someone were interested in going to a beach in India, where would you recommend that they go? First time over there,
Goa for sure. It's a no-brainer.
Goa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic place. I think it's a good mix of Indians and you'll see a lot of tourists there. So yeah, it's a great place.
Okay.
Add it to the list.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of A Little Privacy, Please. Sincere thanks to Kalindhi Bhatia for staying up late and joining us and bringing us up to speed on the significant new developments in India's privacy laws. And we will see you next time.